Hello everybody, Church of Witchcraft here. I'm Andrews. I'm one of the administration. I'm on the synod, and today we're going to be talking about crafting with confidence, or casting with confidence. Casting with confidence is an important aspect that a lot of people run into some uncertainty with how they're going to cast a spell, what dangers might exist inside of that, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Also, welcome to our internet viewers as well. YouTube out there, thank you for watching and seeing all those things. Please share the video if you want to, far and wide, because it's helpful for all of the witches that we know, and anybody who's not affiliated to also be part of this too. I'm going to have one of my other friends over here see if I'm in frame and make sure my head's not being cut off real quick. And
there we go.
okay, so as long as I don't move from exactly this spot, right?
Yep.
Normally, you would see me in a chair, but I decided to stand up because I was driving, because I'm in Denver and normally I'm in Colorado Springs and I'm kind of tired of sitting. Also, I'm going to be enjoying my coffee, so we'll work around that. Casting with confidence is a really important skill, and one of those has to be with the development of your own personal self-esteem. And this is also open forum, so you can also have a conversation with me for the person who's here as well, other than myself, because I'm not just in an empty room, shockingly. Just so you know also that we're in the Woodbury Library in Denver near 32nd and Federal. So, self-esteem, some of my theories about self-esteem, most of that is generated from your mother. Most mothers tend to impart self-esteem to the individual. When there's either less motherly things going on in somebody's life, when there's more of an absence of that or a vacuum of that, self-esteem becomes kind of difficult. This is also just one of many different iterations of where self-esteem is generated. It's part of the group coherence that I've talked about in the past as well. Group coherence is relevant for how you form an idea about your own self. That being said, so Descartes had said, "I think I am," was the direct translation from the French that he originally wrote in. So the "I think I am" has some problems, and when I was running one of the philosophy clubs in Colorado Springs, we realized that that needed an adjustment. So our proposal is that I am who you think I am. I know that's going to bend your minds a little bit, but suffice to say, what I'm projecting outwards is then going to be received by other people that are outside of myself. They're going to confirm that yes, indeed, that is how I'm acting, and then that tells me to continue to do that or act in that way. It's a self-affirming loop. This is an important factor of how to cast with confidence, because we're going to get back to this. So we're setting up some of these basics that sort of understand how self-esteem works and where we're getting that from and how we generate that information of that programming that we're doing with spellwork or witchcraft, or however you want to phrase that. So, I am who you think I am, and that's the general group coherence. They say, you know what, you are doing this, and I totally agree that you're doing that, and you go, yes, I am doing that. And that in itself is what's reinforcing our own self-concept. So, I think I am, by Descartes, has an adjustment to the group coherence component that I'm talking about now. In terms of the group coherence, that self-esteem is generated by that group coherence. With self-esteem and other people saying that, yes, you're confident, yes, I see that you're capable, and people reinforcing that concept for yourself is what's generating that self-esteem feedback loop, right? So not only does it just come from your mother or your family and those places, it also is coming from the places of those that are in your immediate circle. This is part of our manifestation construct. So understanding how we manifest things, there's this big push within witchcraft and in most magical systems that say, how are we going to manifest? Manifest something, be positive. And that's great, but that's just about as great as telling somebody who's depressed, have you tried just not being depressed? That's not really a functional thing. And it's really frustrating, especially for somebody who's experiencing clinical depression or any of those kinds of mental difficulties at that time, just to tell them to get over it. Is the same thing as saying just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and keep going, right? Put on your big boy skirt and go along with yourself, it's fine. The thing is that if you just tell somebody to manifest with positivity, manifest what? Manifest how? If you have none of the self-esteem from that feedback loop, like I was saying with your community and the social constructs that you have without that feedback loop informing you that yes, in fact, this is something that I'm sure to be able to do. You can't really manifest very well, or it's going to be really hard. There's no avenue that says I can't do this, right? It just makes it a little bit harder. If I don't have the self-esteem myself, I don't have my own self-respect, I can still manifest. It's just going to be a lot trickier because I can't trust myself. And this is where much of the witchcraft is going to come from, is trust in the self as well as trust in others. Because if you can't trust people, so if you are in the self-esteem feedback loop where you're being confirmed and everybody's saying that yes, indeed, you have self-esteem and respect, that's great. But if you can't trust those people around you, those things don't really mean anything to anybody. And so the self-esteem that you're experiencing is a little shakier. So trust is another really important component of developing self-esteem. Self-respect is slightly different than self-esteem. Self-esteem is, I would say, the ability or the confidence that I can do something. Self-respect is the I have autonomy and I have the ability to say that I matter, whether or not we're nihilistic or stoic or whatever philosophical frame that you're using. The ability to respect yourself and say that I deserve something is also a really crucial component of this. The ability to say that the self-esteem, I can indeed do this, and I see the proof of doing that. The self-respect piece says, I definitely am worth having these things in my life. And it's based on all of that group coherence. Group coherence is also part of having a coven, for example, or being a part of any community such as the Church of Witchcraft, right? There are groups, the group that's in there is helping generate more of that group coherence. And we're developing trust. Developing trust so that we know that what they're saying when I say that, yes, you are a powerful witch indeed, or yes, you are a capable individual, you can trust that we actually mean that thing and that it's not just a falsehood where I'm just trying to make you feel better. And so honesty is a really important practical component of how we do witchcraft in that itself. So with your self-esteem growing and your self-respect growing and the information from your family unit or whatever close-knit community you have, developing that is part of how we develop confidence in our casting. And not just having the information of mainstream media or even just what you're talking about within groups on Facebook or on Reddit or wherever your social media is coming from. Specifically when people just tell you that there's some errant rule such as the threefold law, which we absolutely respect as a thing, especially within the Wiccan tradition and Wicca system in that of itself. It's a whole other thing. That absolutely exists, and we respect that that is how they believe, and that is relevant and valid. And again, that goes back to building that honesty, that self-esteem, and that self-respect, and respecting those other ideas about how belief works. For the other reasons that we have, when you have the threefold law, or you have some rule that one system has, or one tradition has, it doesn't mean that for everything under the corpus of witchcraft. There's paganism, which is essentially just the umbrella of nature-based faiths. Non-Abrahamic, doesn't follow a solar deity of some iteration, such as Christianity or any of the Egyptian gods. Those are all within that same kind of solar deity component. So when you're casting with that confidence and having that honesty within yourself, these rules may apply to those traditions and that of themselves or those systems, but you may have your own beliefs. And that is part of the individualized cult institution, which is something that we've talked about before. Your own relationship with the divine, your own way of communing with the divine. Communing with the divine is the auspice of everybody. This goes back sort of into, I guess, pre-recorded history, more of the oral history, when we initially started having divine utterances. Things and events that happen in our life, such as a really easy one, thunder. Thunder happens, people freak out, the village goes, we're all going to die, and somebody's in the sky making thunder happen. Totally reasonable, but we have this upwelling, individual upwelling that said, we need to explain what this is, or we want to honor this, or it's just so intense that we have this emotional, this spontaneous, improvisational sort of conversation or communion with the divine. And each person, pre-recorded history, mostly in oral situations, mostly in villages and that sort of thing, they had a conversation with the divine and they had a connection to the divine with each individual. Each individual had this connection. When we started moving to role specialization, when we got into agriculture, some people were gatherers, some people were farmers, some people were merchants. All of those started taking away time from us having that divine communion. And then we gave that role specialization to a person, sometimes called a shaman, or the priest of the village, or whatever spiritual leader was called in their specific region. And then when we have that specialization, we lost that individualized cult institution and our own power within our ability to have a divine communion or a conversation with divinity. I would propose that all witches should go back and return to that, but I understand if you have a system where you have a high priest, high priestess, or some other religious figure that's having that conversation on your behalf and is acting as that appropriate conduit. If they're denying you access to those things, you may want to reconsider your interaction with that specific group. I digress. And I'm going to get some coffee real quick. So, each tradition has its own rules. Each system has its own rules, but they don't apply to all witchcraft across the board. There is no one Bible of witchcraft. This is why the individualized cult institution needs to exist. Because it's your connection with divine, with magic, with witchcraft, however you find that to see fit. Systems and traditions are fantastic to have, especially if you feel lost or you have a really strong connection. I have a friend who has they've explained their connection to their deity as a divine entity that sits on their heart, literally, and has a conversation with them. Now, this is interesting because I realized that this is actually a phonemic principle as well. The HGA, or the Holy Guardian Angel, that they have a conversation with. Their most realized metaphysical autonomous form that they have an interaction with. And I suspect that she has arrived at the same concept that Belamites have by sheer incident. And so when something like that happens, if there's a system or tradition that fits that explains that better, definitely follow it, pursue it, and be cautious and curious, right? You can trust in yourself at the very least, and that's where you have to start building initial trust, is to make sure that you can trust yourself, because that's where your self-respect is going to come from. If you don't self-respect yourself, it's going to be really hard to accomplish anything and gain self-esteem. So I'm not just going to tell you, go have self-esteem, go make self-respect. You're going to lose this on occasion. You're going to have days where you're more confident than others. You're going to have some moments that have more esteem than others. You're going to be more assured of yourself in certain circumstances versus others. And allow yourself that room to have that air, or rather that flux within your own confidence and your own esteem. You can develop that and you can lose it. But developing it is trusting and adhering to principles. So discipline is one of those things. Devotion to a thing is a whole other thing, but discipline in that itself is going to provide some of that self-respect development. I can trust that I'm going to show up. If nobody else shows up, I'm still going to show up for me, for my divinity, whether it's a deity or elements or however your witchcraft formulates in your craft. That discipline is showing that I can prove to myself that I can be consistent, that I can trust that I'm going to be there. And from that initial development of that trust in yourself, then you can start moving outwards. I don't remember exactly, you might remember this. It's the ring system, right? You start with yourself and then you move outwards from there. I don't know what system that's in.
I don't either.
But basically, it's starting with the self and then moving forwards out from that, radiating from the self. The self is the first altar, as we've talked about before, and that's also the magic that you're doing is some of this self-esteem and self-respect building that you're doing, because it's preparing your altar to do the work and be able to cast with confidence, right? If I can't trust in myself that I'm going to show up, then how am I ever going to develop any sort of discipline? I can't show up and I can't develop these habits. And we talked about habits before, a couple sermons ago. We talked about how we have a cue, routine, and a reward. The cue of something occurring. The routine, the things you do from that cue, and the reward, the thing that you get from that. Just like you have with ritual, they have a cue, routine, and a reward. This is why we continue to do ritual and why it's part of our existence. And most witches have ritual. And even non-witches have ritual. Rituals all over the place. Which order you put your shoes on. Which leg goes in your pants first. Do I eat with my left or my right hand, right? And so when you're doing cue, routine, reward, you're seeing that within ritual. There's a cue. Full moon happens or dark moon happens. And then you've got the routine that you do. I see the moon is full, I do these sets of behaviors, and then I get a reward from that. The moods and manifestations, or the mood and manipulation that comes into myself, that I'm going to do that based on those things, and it's developing a habituated response to your craft. And this is part of that discipline. So relying on how to build and develop your cues, routines, and rewards are part of witchcraft, as well as the majority of the rest of your life. And once I have this consistency, I'm getting a reward out of this feedback loop, right? Because I don't just need other humans to say, yes, you're doing this thing, right? Working with witchcraft, working with magic is going to have its own rewards and part of that, and it's going to be that same feedback loop, but on a divine level, or metaphysical level with your witchcraft, right? So if I have a cue of like the full moon, and then I do a series of behaviors, the routine, and then I get a reward out of that, it is a self-affirming loop. I act this way, this thing happens, and then I realize that I can keep doing that, so I'm going to continue to do that because I'm gaining some benefit from what it is that I'm doing. And so I continue to do that, so it feeds back. And that's how we start developing that trust in ourselves, and that self-esteem, that yes, in fact, I can do this, and yes, in fact, it's real, I'm experiencing something, whether it's emotional or physical or neural, I don't know. It could be a mixture of all of those or none of those. That's kind of jury's out, and that's going to be part of your own witchcraft exploration of trying to figure out where that comes from. And at what point do you say, that's enough for me, right? Because you can get into absurdity where you start developing so many things that you lose track of what it is that you're doing. I see that a lot in all ceremonies and rituals and all across the craft, that people will start doing a thing and then they just get lost in all the nitty-gritty details. Hats off to the ceremonial magician. I don't know how they manage that many various things, but that is incredible. Because to be able to be that consistent, that disciplined, that devoted to what you're doing, and do it the same way every time is incredible. I can't do that. Like, there's sometimes I might just be off a few degrees, right? Where I'm not going to be spot on in my 9-foot circle. I'm going to have an 8.36 inch, circle. They're doing an amazing thing, and that's incredible, and it's just not within me, which is why I know I'm not a ceremonial magician. However, that notwithstanding, there are these developed languages that you're having with yourself, that feedback loop that you're building. And all of this is connecting into the ability to cast with confidence. Again, remind yourself, whenever you're doing something, to not get lost in the rules of another system, or tradition, or system that doesn't fit with you, or that doesn't resonate with you. To get to whatever your craft is, or whatever your tradition or system is going to be, or how it's going to be shaped, you need to experiment. Try all of the occult technologies. Try the whole pantheon of different divination systems, tarot, runes, pendulums, Om. All of those things are going to be relevant for you to start experiencing, because you can't start having a divine conversation. You don't start somewhere. Even if you don't have a system or a tradition, just pick up and do some stuff. Something's going to click with you. You'll find a group of people, or a community, or a coven, or a church that may be the exact thing that you need to fit, but to start that beginning conversation, to start that self-respect, and to see yourself attaining those things, you have to start somewhere. So don't worry about trying to find your tradition immediately. Pick stuff up, start moving it around. Take the tools that you have that are available, the information, and start playing with it, and start adapting some of that into your own course. When I'm talking to other people about their developing a tradition that they do, or a system that they may have that doesn't exist or isn't predicated on anything, I first ask, is there a specific region or time period that you want to look at first, right? Sometimes they have that. Another question that's really important to ask is there a specific area that you're attuned with? So say, for example, I know people who are into Egyptian stuff. So I might give them out to OTL, right? I might aim them towards the Thelema. I might aim them towards the Golden Dawn, because there are overlays within that system. Maybe they have a feeling of Hellenistic Greek. Go for it. If you feel Roman, go do it, right? I'm trying to find those specific aspects within a person's craft, the things that they already do, the propensity that they already have, to start developing whatever tradition or system that they're going to be working with, because that's going to start informing where your craft is going to go. Thank you for your patience while I drink my coffee. So with our tradition and knowing some of where it's going to be anchored in, what time period, what area you might be looking at, how to develop self-respect and self-esteem, what rules may or may not apply to you. Casting with confidence also, while it comes from all those places, it's also be sure of your end. intent. Because without intent, what is it that you're even doing, right? Without intent, you're just errantly doing things. And I have made allusions to this as well in the past, and I will continue to do so because it's a great example. So say, for example, there's two very specific examples here. The first one that I use is the monetary example. The monetary example is a witch says, I want money. And it's like, that's great, okay? Money comes in a lot of different forms, right? Wealth comes in a lot of different forms. It's just a fiat currency, it's a stand-in for value of something. In my tradition, in my system that I'm following, the celestial witchcraft that I do, I talk about that time is really our only currency. Because I have to use my time to get the cotton squares, to go get the other thing that I want. And so time really is my only currency. How much of my time do I want to spend earning those cotton squares? How much of my time do I want to spend with my friends? Or being disciplined? Or in communion with the divine? How do I want to spend that time? So for me, time is the currency that I'm functioning within. Similarly, being assured of where you want to be, how you want to spend your time, is really important to your craft. Because if you're not willing to spend time on it, you're not going to do it consistently, you're not going to get the routine and the reward out of that, and then you're going to see basically a bunch of failure, a bunch of starts and stops. And that starting and stopping loses some of that self-respect and that self-esteem because now you're not really accomplishing anything. Spells are going to take a long time, can take a long time to manifest. Spell babysitting, I would 1000% tell you, don't worry about it, right? If you want to set your intention and then just let it take its course. Because we don't know how it's going to take its course. And similarly with that money example, if a witch just says, I'm going to cast a spell to earn money, to what end? Why do you want the money? Well, I want money for a new house. Well, what does a new house actually represent? And this is where we're going to drill down on where we were talking about the spell map last time in Eyes of the Witch from Colorado Springs, that knowing what your spell map is, not just the sequence of behaviors that you're going to take. You know, I'm going to open a circle, I'm going to call in the quarters, I'm going to do it this way, or I'm going to, make a 9-foot circle consistently in the same place every time. However you're going to build that is part of your spell map. But the nugget of that is you're starting with your initial invocations. What is, if you're going to cast a circle or deity or call the quarters, and then after that is the working. What are we going to do, right? What is the intent that I have to manifest? So if you're saying I want money to buy a house is not necessarily the object you want. There are things that the house gives you or grants you, such as security, stability, safety. Those are the components that you're looking for. The money that you said initially were like, I want to make money. The reason is to get a house. But the reason you want a house is for your own stability. So really, the spell is not about I want money. It is I want stability. And that's a way different type of spell that you're working with, because now you're driving your intent after you've done all the first pieces of that in your spell map, and then you're finding out exactly what it is you want to focus on in your spell work and what it really means to you. Love is another one, right? Where somebody says, I want to do a love spell. I want somebody to love me, and I want somebody to care for me, right? Why would they do a spell for somebody else? Really, if somebody wants love, it's because either they want more of what they don't have, or they want the things that come from having a significant other or multiple significant others, depending on your preferences. But that being said, if I'm doing a love spell to force somebody to do that, then really what the question for me then is, why do I want their love? Is it because I want to be like them, and I want them in my life, so I want them to be there, and I want to have them in my circumstances? Better ways to do that spell work. Honest. It would probably be better to be, honest with them and just hang out with them instead of trying to force them with love spell, right? Love spells also, then what we're trying to get is that security, that comfort, that feedback, that security and safety within a relationship, the things that it grants you, the products of that love that you get. So if you're in a relationship and you gain something from that, it's a reciprocal relationship between the two. You get something from, both of you get something, or all of you get something from that relationship. And so really the love spell is not about, I'm going to get this person to do this thing. What is it that you want from that person? What do you want from that relationship? And so it would be, in my opinion, developing a love spell is more of, how do I become more receptive? How do I make myself the beacon to attract that kind of love? Instead of trying to force that love on somebody, because just as in psychology, for me, I can read people pretty well. And I can get around things that they haven't necessarily told me yet. And so it seems like a supernatural skill, but frankly it's just that I spend enough time with you that eventually I sort of understand your motivations and moods, and that is what develops that, and then I suddenly have internal insight about you. But I intentionally shut that off with friends and family, because it is, in my opinion, very disrespectful for somebody who hasn't shared that yet with me. It's not for me to know what they haven't yet shared. And so I specifically don't cross-analyze friends and family for that reason, because they have yet to share that with me, and it is their right to share what information they want to with me, when or if they want to. So similarly within the love construct, I'm building myself to be the most radiant, right? In my system, it's the syncretic form, making myself the paragon of what it is that I want to be, what I want to be in my life. Because remember, if we're thinking back, we're going to go all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, I guess monologue at this point, that when you're developing some of those, to go back to the very beginning, what was it that I had said? I'm trying to remember that track. It was
self-esteem and self-respect.
Self-esteem, self-respect. Now I'm losing it. It'll come back, I swear. Trust me, YouTube, it's gonna come back. It's not there. Okay, well love, radiant, self-syncretic form. Developing yourself into that. You have to be able to trust yourself to develop a unified radiance. And it goes back to that ripple, that radiant effect, right? You start with yourself, and you develop that self-respect and self-esteem, and then you go to your friends, then you can go to your family, then you can continue to grow from there. And that is part of building the ability to cast with confidence. If you don't have a spell map, the beginnings of a ritual or spell, the end of a ritual or spell, and the middle part of what's really meaningful for you, what you're really trying to accomplish with that, how can you really cast anything with confidence? Because you don't know what you want. If you don't know what you want, how could you possibly manifest that? Do you just say, give me money? For what? For what reason? For what purpose? Money will manifest itself when you know what it is you want and how you're trying to aim towards that. It's not trying to get the object of the thing. You want the thing that's already going to happen, and then around that, things will come into your being or into your reality that are going to be necessary to get you to that point. And it's not just, money is a tool to get somewhere, conduit, to go somewhere. It's not the end product of the things you want. So when you're casting with confidence, you need to know what it is you're doing, why you're doing it, and be real with yourself. And this is, again, part of your self-respect and self-esteem. Because some of these are going to be kind of terrible. And this is part of shadow work, or the very popularized shadow work that's happening. You have to face the things that you don't have, and be real that I don't have these right now. And that, in a lot of cases, is going to be kind of a bummer, because you aren't where you want to be. And then being faced with that, not just arrogantly in your everyday life, like, oh, I can't afford this, or oh, I can't go get that, or I can't go and do this thing, or these people aren't here, or this love isn't here, right? Those are just fleeting. They're not something you're focused on. But when you start trying to when you're building a spell map, when you start trying to drive your intent and really come up with that, you are faced wholly with all of the terrible things that you have to deal with. Then it's not always terrible. You're faced with that which you don't have, right? Because it doesn't exist yet. You're trying to manifest that. You're using spells to do that. So when you're when you're casting with that intent, when you're casting with confidence, you're going to have to face the things that you don't have and be realistic with yourself that I'm not there yet, and that's okay to do that. It takes time to progress, just like I'm doing with the church and what all the other administration of the synod is doing. Also, we're not exactly where we want to be, and frankly, we probably won't ever be, but that's okay because it's going to manifest in a way that we can't even predict. It's going to form however it's going to form. And it's about caring for what does manifest, not trying to force it or shoehorn it into something that we imagine it to be or a projection. We can sort of guide it to the point we want it to go, but how it's going to get there and what it's going to look like when we get there is unpredictable. I can't know that. But doing spell work during that development, doing that spell work is allowing those alterations and that way to form and have its own living, breathing manifestation instead of me going, it has to be exactly this way. And that's what the spell babysitting is, why I dissuade people from doing so, because you're trying to shoehorn it into exactly what you want. And if you're shoehorning it into that, you're just going to break it, right? You're focusing on it too much. You would need to trust in your own magic, your own witchcraft, to develop in the way that it's going to, but it's going to be not necessarily exactly the way you think. And this goes back to the observation piece. I need to be aware, and I have to keep this sort of liminal state. I have to be aware and observant of everything around me, the people that are in my life, the things that are manifesting, the opportunities that have arisen, and that observation is me being aware of what's happening. And that isn't spell babysitting, it's just being observant. And that's why Acts of the Witch are so important, because I need to know when things are happening. Because there's not a giant red flag that's gonna, that's gonna show up somewhere and just go, you did it, the spell's done, you got the thing. You'll just suddenly be doing the thing, and then you're just like, wait a minute, this is exactly what I wanted. And then you just are suddenly aware of that. And that observation, increasing your observation, is going to increase how often you see that. And the more frequently you build in and cast with that confidence, you're building a highway to your own magic, that straight line path. Instead of working through the brambles trying to get there, you can still get there, it's just going to be really hard. This way, when you're casting with confidence, and the more spells that you cast, the more rituals you do, and the more observation that you have, that highway, that conduit to what you're trying to cast, what you're trying to make a spell for, becomes far easier to accomplish. And this again goes back to building your self-respect and your own self-esteem, because then you're seeing results. But having only one result in mind is going to really narrow your focus of what's actually possible. And keeping a broader spectrum or broader viewpoint open and allowing things to manifest as they will is healthier. And it gives you a lot less stress. And then you're not trying to hound and look for the thing and trying to drill down and go, there it is. Is it here yet? Is it here yet? It's going to. It's like if you order anything from another country. Don't worry about it. It's going to show up at some point, but it could get lost in the mail. Maybe the ship went down the Atlantic. Who knows, right? It doesn't really matter. Eventually, the object will come to you. And even if it doesn't arrive, there's still plenty of things that you can do to resolve the situation. Just like if you're casting a spell and it doesn't necessarily arrive, you have the option to do it again. And that's okay. You're going to get this wrong. And be okay with it being wrong. Just like our lights going out for some random reason. I guess I didn't move enough. There we go. Lights are back on. Casting with confidence, making lights go on. But scientific witchcraft. Two words that you wouldn't necessarily put together or pair together. Scientific witchcraft, really what we're talking about, Carmen Monteverde and myself and several witches that I know think about witchcraft in this way, right? We have a hypothesis. We have a theory. Then we try to do the thing, and then we wait, we do the thing, and then we observe the thing, and if the thing doesn't happen, we go back to the beginning, and we revise our hypothesis. This is the scientific method that we're talking about, and the same thing can be applied to witchcraft. So, ergo, scientific witchcraft. It's having a hypothesis. I want money. Well, do I really want money? I actually want all the things that come with the money. I really want stability. I feel unhinged, and I don't feel confident, and I need money to do this, right? Then I go, all right, I'm going to do a spell about this. I have written down my map, and then I'm going to do the thing, and then nothing happens after a month. You might want to revise why that's happening. And this is things that can go inside of your Book of Shadows, right? For me, I split the two things up, so I have a magic field log, which is all of my ideas that are just a host and smattering of different concepts that I'm putting down so I don't lose them, so it's more stream of conscious. And then when things are tested and proven, we're going to keep dancing around these lights. Right now the lights are on me, but we have lights going out in the room. Hey, thank you, I appreciate it. So I have a stream of consciousness in the magic field log. When I see these things, and I've done my scientific witchcraft, I have the hypothesis, I do the thing, I observe the result, and if I get what I want, cool, it goes in the Book of Shadows, and then I write it down, and I give it the respect and reverence within my Book of Shadows, because I know that that specific thing works. And here's another really important piece, that even though it worked, and may work for years, suddenly, it may just stop working. And you're gonna have to go back and check again, and do the same sequence again. This is the practice of witchcraft. This is casting with confidence, knowing that things are going to get right and some things are going to get not so correct, and then you're going to revise that. You're going to continue to adapt and evolve, and it's that, again, cue, routine, reward. I see the cue, I'm going to do the spell, I did the routine and the behaviors for that, I get the reward from it. And if you're going cue routine, you're doing this reward, you're getting it for years, and it just suddenly stops giving you the reward or the result that you want, go back and try again. Build a new ritual, build a new spell. Trust yourself that you can do this, and I guarantee you, you can absolutely do this. There's not going to be likely, I highly doubt they're ever going to be able to shoot lightning bolts out of your hands. I highly doubt they're ever going to be able to summon a magic room from some extra room. I very much doubt that we're going to see a lot of Harry Potter level fancy stuff that's happening. Casting with confidence is more of how we're marshaling ourselves, how we're informing ourselves. And very specifically, I take ritual to be a type of neuro-linguistic programming. Big fancy word, neuro-linguistic programming. And what I mean by that is this is where we start blending some of the science with magic, if you will, or science with witchcraft. Neuro-linguistic programming is basically the same concept, and I've said this in other sermons before, that if you start thinking about white cars, suddenly there's a whole bunch of white cars everywhere. You're programming your own conscience to think about white cars, just like you would with a spell. So if I want to manifest, if I wanted money, and I started there, so I'm making my spell now, I move into, actually I want the stability that comes with that, and the security. If you start focusing on that, the very thing is going to start happening. I'm giving myself the set of instructions to pay attention to the opportunities that provide that security and stability that I was aiming for. And then I see the results from that. And this is where we start getting into that hybridized science, witchcraft blend, right? Debate that amongst yourselves. There's not really any great way to phrase this. There's no one written rule that says this is the exact way that it happens, but that neuro-linguistic programming is informing us and telling us, pre-programmed our conscious, subconscious really, to start being receptive to these things, which comes into the observation part. If you start picking this apart too much, it does get into that absurdity like I was talking about earlier. If you get into that absurdism sort of piece, everything sort of starts breaking down and you get lost and you lose the witchcraft, you lose the magic. And then you're just focused on this specific thing happening and all the little nitty-gritty pieces to that, and that also feels kind of terrible to me. There is an element of magic to this. Magic exists, whether you want to call it energy, if you want to call it quantum, or however you want to phrase that. These are metaphors for things that we understand, and these are ways to get to those things and develop that casting with confidence. And so I entreat all of you who are watching this video, or who may see this video, past, present, or future, that you just try stuff. And it doesn't have to be elaborate. These can be really simple things. For example, and I've made this, I think I've stated this before, my coffee, for example, I might stir it Jeschel, Dazel, depending on the pronunciation, or Wittershins, for or against time, or for or against magic, right? And I'm doing those things. So I had a really ridiculous headache for 2 days. And so every morning that I made my coffee, I wanted to take away something. So I went against the flow of magic to eradicate that specific thing. That's a spell. That's as simple as it needs to be. You would even make it even simpler. Is meditation perhaps a spell in and of itself? Is prayer a spell? Some things you may want to consider. And certainly I have my own opinions about those and plenty of thoughts about them. But consider where your spells may lie. That it doesn't necessarily have to be, I'm going to get on my black cloak and I'm going to go set up this giant circle. I'm going to do it on a Tuesday under the full moon with this specific angel or whatever. That's also a spell. Do it. That's great. But if you really are just starting out, start with the simple things. And somebody was on the forum, another forum that I was talking to, and they were worried. They said, oh my God, I'm going to miss the full moon. I don't have enough time to prepare anything. What am I going to do? They said they were in a RV, and they didn't have any of their accoutrement. They didn't have any of their ritual stuff, and they didn't know what to do. The thing is that the first altar, in our opinion, within the church is specifically, you are your altar. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what you're doing. But my advice to this individual, I told them, I said, do you have a match or a lighter? They said, yes, I've got that. I'm like, that's awesome. Do you have a candle? They're like, actually, yes, I do. I have a tea light. I'm like, super. And I'm like, okay, do you have anything you want to, focus on? They said, yes. And they gave me a couple of sentences, and I went, cool. Go outside, light your tea candle, stare at the moon, say the thing 3 times, go back inside. You just done a spell. He doesn't need all of those things. All of those accoutrements are nice to have. They are the markers, right? So when I'm doing ritual, when there's spells being done, the more things, so set and setting are important and valuable. And they're cues, triggers, if you will, that cue that programming. It puts you into that space, and this is part of making your own circle, or casting your circle, or casting a sacred space. Each one of those things that are on your altar, or whatever is around you, whether it's crystals or wands, or acne, or chalices, any of those things that you might see classically, or think classically are in magic, and certainly they are, those are cues that tell us we're going to be starting to do some special stuff here. We're going to work with the metaphysical. And that gives my mind the idea to start programming again. And that is helping me cast with confidence because I have the tools around me. I have the set and setting. So why do we go to a forest and do something in a specific location? Because it's the setting that you're in. It is a special place. And while we may not always have access to the special places, having yourself as the first altar, doesn't matter where you are, you can do that. You are the special place in that of itself, and you can trust that you're going to be there. But to build that trust, do those things that we had just talked about in these things, right? Developing your self-respect, your self-esteem, deriving a spell map that's going to be conscientious of what you're doing. And that is what develops your casting with confidence. Try stuff and move those things around. And figure out what works for you. Not everything's going to work with you. Not all deities are going to be something that, you may not connect with a certain deity or pantheon. Maybe you do it for years and then it goes away, or the relationship changes. Just like hand fasting, while yes, it would be phenomenal if those lasted until your death, that would be great, but that's why hand fastings exist partly the way they do. You tie two lives together. And at such a time that the paths diverge. If they diverge, then you untie the two and they go about their own business. And they may go be tied to somebody else. But that may change as people develop, or maybe don't develop, because in a relationship such as that, one person may evolve and may continue their progression, and the other may just need to stay behind for a little bit. And there can be some inner workings with that, but that's why we tie together and then untie, because it's less forceful. There's less push that till death do us part, we must do this thing, and that's great. And those rituals and those ceremonies for traditional Abrahamic marriages where we're sharing rings and that sort of thing, and wild spouses are great. Do that. That is an awesome ritual. It's a great ceremony. Keep doing that. But if you're doing hand fasting, why? Because there's more flexibility for the individuals to grow, and there's not such an emphasis. They're choosing each other consistently, and they can develop together. Now, I've talked about this in primarily only solitary context. But before I continue, I'm going to ask, what time are we at?
4:18.
Hey, look at me go. I can talk for quite some time, and this is only the beginning of half of this stuff. I'm going to pause momentarily. Did you have anything you want to say or thoughts?
Not really.
Okay. So, solitary application. How you develop casting with confidence in yourself. Similarly to the beginning of this whole presentation, you must work on the self first. Face the shadow work, face the demons, or use whatever allegory that you want to use to better understand that. We can go into Solomonic magic, so it's a huge other thing. Again, my jury's still out on the whether or not demons or deities are actually real, but this is not the conversation for that, because there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into my consideration and querying of those things. However, Solomonic magic, we're calling in demons, and in at least one instance, calling in demons may just be the calling of your own psyche and what that represents in your own brain in a metaphysical form. Kind of like Gestalt technique in therapy. Empty chair. I'm going to talk to the chair, give all my stuff to that thing. Solomonic magic just kicked that up a notch and basically said, we're going to make a demon out of this, and we're just going to take the part of your brain in here, and we're going to put that in front of you, and you're going to summon and lash and control that demon. Right? And that's similarly to controlling your own internal self and building that self-confidence. But, I digress, the casting of confidence, having to work on the self. You can call these things in, or you can work with things and do the shadow work that's necessary to prepare yourself. And once the self is prepared, in my tradition it would be the syncretic form, but once that syncretic form is developed, once that harmony is built, once you've started working on the shadow work, it's never complete, don't even try to finish it. It's just never done. It's forever. So just keep working on shadow work and you'll get like 2/3 of the way, and that's good enough. just keep it in mind and keep working towards it, because things are going to keep breaking. You can't fix everything. Once that has been done, and you start addressing your own shadow work, the challenge that you have with yourself, whatever they might be, however you might do that, spells, rituals, divination, whatever seems to fit your particular system, that's when you can connect to another person. And you can start developing casting with confidence together. This is what covens do. This is what churches do. This is what witches do when they get together in covens. They trust each other. They've done some of their own self-work to develop their own spells and to have that confidence themselves. And when they can bring that to the table, then they can do greater magic together, because now they're all working together and having that same feedback loop that I was talking about with group coherence. Because if you have a whole coven of people and you know that you've got confidence, they all know you have confidence, and they reflect that back to you, and it informs your own self-respect, your own self-esteem, and then you start working together. And you don't have to come to the table with everything. Covens that are healthy can bring that to the table. Somebody who might feel a bit lost or lacking in esteem or respect. That means that they can gain some of that in the things that they see from other people within their coven. So don't be afraid to go and find a coven or a group to practice or cast spells with, because they may help you develop that esteem and respect. And if they're not, or if they're harming it, you should probably find another group to play with, because that's going to be very damaging to yourself, and it's going to put you into some toxic situations. Again, like the witch, be observant of your coven. You don't need to judge them, you don't need to be hyper aware, vigilant about these things. It's just being aware of what you feel internally, what you feel with yourself, and the things that you've worked on and casted for yourself to be able to work in that environment. And that security in yourself is going to help inform what your coven is doing and how you're working within your coven, and how you can be there for somebody else. Because once you're there for somebody else, they can similarly be there for you. So group casting has to do with the ability with people that are casting together to have that synchrony, that harmony with themselves, to cast with confidence for themselves, because then they can cast with confidence with others, and they can help continue to inform their own practice and continue to cast with confidence. With all that said, thank you again for joining us on Church of Witchcraft Talks and our sermons. And today we talked about our casting with confidence. Carmen Monteverde couldn't be here today, but I wanted to make sure to stand in and give you the same kind of information that we had talked about prior. And so go try things, cast with confidence. Don't be too scared about, don't let other systems dictate how you're going to do things. If you haven't done the exploration, if the system you honor, then yes, honor their rules and their values. That makes sense. But when you're starting out, you're starting as a new witch, you're starting to cast these things, then by all means, don't let other people tell you exactly how you're supposed to do this. I try to give you as broad of a spectrum as possible. The church tries to give as neutral a spectrum as possible for you to develop and overlay things that are important to you and that come with values for you to use these. Because all witches do spells, all of us do rituals, all of us do ceremonies. How we do this and how we get there is an entirely different thing. And your development of self-respect and self-esteem is something that is independent of any of the pantheons or traditions or countries or regions or eras. It doesn't, all of those come after your ability to do that. And they can also work in tandem to help you develop those things if you have a strong connection to them. Similarly, if you have questions about this, or if you need some assistance getting started, getting a jump start on that, that's part of what the church does too. The Embers program is our mentorship program, and you can absolutely go fill that out on our website. There's a form there for you that you can get, just email us with that form, and you'll find somebody that will pair you with a mentor to help you start developing some of these things if you really don't have that confidence. We're here for that, and we want to listen to your unique representation of witchcraft, and we're going to guide everything and derive everything from your unique perspective of your craft, not what we think the craft should be. We're going to be sensitive to how you want to pursue your witchcraft and try to connect you with the people that can further that goal as well. So thanks YouTube for listening again. Thank you for everybody who's here today as well for listening to this next Witchcraft Talks. The next one's going to be coming up is going to be Hands of the Witch, and that's going to be in Colorado Springs. You also check out our Discord too. We have a whole bunch of active community there as well. We're talking about spells and different things that are happening in witchcraft around the world and the news and all of those things that are part of that. So hang out there, join the 1692 crew, and there's also our affiliate forum there as well. If you have questions, always feel free to call us or email us, and all that information is on our website, churchofwitchcraft.org. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, evening, or afternoon, I suppose.